Hey everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Pokemon Legends Arceus versus The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. To recap, both games are tied so far with a score of 4-4, so if you want to find out who won which category up until now, feel free to go back and watch that either before you watch this video or after. This series is my 10,000 subscribers special, so if you want more specials like this, let's get to 50,000 next. Either way, we're here to have some fun continuing our comparative analysis of two massive releases, so let's not waste any more time. The category we'll be continuing on from here is the campaign format, how the story unfolds while you play these more open titles in their respective series. As everyone knows, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is fairly well known for its absolute level of freedom when it comes to completing the game. From the very start, save for the Great Plateau tutorial, you can tackle Hyrule in any way you want to, even by going straight to the final boss of the game if you dare. There are 4 major dungeons and over 120 shrine dungeons to complete around the massive map. The order in which you complete everything in the game has to offer is entirely up to you, and along the way you can encounter side quests and memory cutscenes at your leisure. It's really hard to top this, right? Well, Pokemon Legends Arceus' approach is slightly different. The story is only told in one particular order. Sounds like a step down, I know, but in practice it actually isn't. Matter of fact, the main story is the only thing that's limited to being a particular way throughout your adventure. And the best part is, you never have to continue it unless you choose to. In the meantime, just like Breath of the Wild, side quests, world exploring, and in this case Pokemon catching, is completely up to the player on how and when they tackle them. Pokemon Legends just has a different way it wants to tell its story, and that's okay! Matter of fact, there is a segment towards the end of the campaign that could only happen and have the effect it had on the player because of its more linear storytelling. Zelda has done this in the past, and honestly, in some cases, such as in Twilight Princess, I even prefer it over Breath of the Wild's non-linear story progression. All in all, both games succeed in what they want to do, and that's why this category ends in a tie. What won't end in a tie though is the next category, side quests. When gauging side quests, I want to look at not only the content, but the rewards we get for completion. Let's take a look at Zelda Breath of the Wild side quests. Some of the most fun I've had in Breath of the Wild are in side quests that involve breaking the norm, such as stealth and tailing missions, or missions that involve fun and interesting stories. Unfortunately, there aren't many of these, and most side quests are relegated to acquiring certain items, defeating certain enemies, and doing photography quests. Now, a lot of these can be fun, such as a quest that has us kill what may have been most of our first Lionel, or finding hidden artifacts scattered across the coastline and snapping photos. But the issue is, these fun ones are also very few and far between. To make matters worse, while the most satisfying rewards mostly involved unlocking shrines, most side quests in Breath of the Wild only end in you obtaining a small sum of money, sometimes even after some truly difficult quests. Heck, even completing the Korok hunt that goes on for your entire playthrough only ends in you getting a big pile of, well, defecation. Ha, very funny, Miyamoto. Let's take a look at Pokemon Legends side quests. What makes these feel so worthwhile is the rewards for doing them. You just plain get rarer items for completing quests in Pokemon Legends than in Breath of the Wild. Typically, quests in Pokemon Legends mostly involve you catching certain Pokemon, or going to certain locations and playing through a mini-story or Pokemon battle. Sometimes, it's a mix of these too. However, even with the more mundane tasks, the player is often treated with exciting new lore about specific Pokemon, characters, and regions. Even better, and one of my favorite rewards, is when you catch a Pokemon for an NPC and they keep them as their friends. It's strangely satisfying to pick out a Pokemon for them and have them treasure that for the rest of your playthrough by keeping them by their side. You can even give them shinies, alphas, and the tiniest variants you can find. More substantial side quests come in the form of the Ghostly Wisp side quest and the Unknown side quest, which last throughout your journey and require you to find them scattered in hidden spots across the different sandboxes. Out of these two, I'd say the Unknown quest is far more fun and satisfying because they're hidden in amazingly clever ways within the environments. But the Ghostly Wisp side quest is no slouch either, typically requiring you to find small nooks and crannies of the map you otherwise wouldn't. The final payoff for these quests is also awesome. The Wisp quest leads to a haunting plot twist. And the unknown quest literally nets you all the unknown forms that exist, as well as the satisfaction of puzzle solving that came with finding them in the first place. There's also a hidden reward you have to find on your own, with no hints after you gather all of them, so that's fun too. All in all, I find myself genuinely wanting to complete side quests in Pokemon Legends because they always satisfied me in one way or another. On top of that, as previously mentioned, the item-based rewards also felt more useful, as typically you got rare items for completing quests. Unfortunately, Breath of the Wild doesn't quite match this, with most rewards being mere pennies, and quests being mostly mundane along the way. I also found myself neglecting the side quests in Breath of the Wild because of this. Pokemon Legends wins this category with little debate. Now, what about when we're out and about in the world? What are the stakes? That's what I want to tackle next between these two titles. Which world constantly provides us with the best balance of danger and fun? Taking a look at Zelda Breath of the Wild, it's fairly balanced in this regard. No matter where you go, you're technically always in danger. Even if there's no enemies around, which is fairly rare, other things can endanger you thanks to the physics system. A giant boulder can fall on your head. Lightning storms can strike up and strike you. A fire can start and burn you. When climbing, you can lose stamina and fall to your death. And heck, you can even hurt yourself with some of your own weapons, such as your bombs. All in all, the world of Breath of the Wild invites exploration and puzzle solving with the occasional enemy scramble and an ever-present danger to your health. Sounds just perfect for an action adventure. How about Pokemon Legends Arceus then? How does that hold up? With the goals here being exploration, story progression, catching them all, and enjoying them all, I think Legends also strikes a fairly perfect balance. For one, there are just as many enemies in Legends as Breath of the Wild, but beyond that, you pretty much can't upgrade your health. Well, you can, up to 5 times I believe, but it always takes a slot of your inventory up and you have to constantly spend money to replenish those upgrades once you use them. Not very economical. That being said, the base health most of us play with and don't upgrade isn't very high, only letting you take about 3 to 4 hits. Don't let a Pokemon hit you off a cliff either, or it's game over. Fall damage isn't very forgiving. Also, unlike Breath of the Wild, you can't warp away when the going gets tough. You have to escape enemy vision before you can warp to safety. And flying away on Hisuian Braviary isn't always a surefire way to escape attacks, especially if a wild Pokemon have ranged attacks. Furthermore, getting afflicted with a status condition makes you unable to mount your Pokemon as well. Scary stuff. But that's not to say it's completely hazardous everywhere. After catching beloved Pokemon, Legends has plenty of safe areas for you to take them out and enjoy the scenery, making the tough moments worth it, and it's all the more satisfying to come across batches of docile Pokemon in the wild, where you can breathe a sigh of relief that you don't have to enter another battle. Comparing these two different approaches between games leads me to conclude they each succeed in a way that they want to accomplish. Zelda Breath of the Wild attains a constant rise and fall of stakes that can change at any moment, either by your own choosing or sometimes by surprise. Pokemon Legends Arceus mostly encourages you to be stealthy and strategic during your journey, but allows you not to be if you don't want to. With constant surprises behind what lurks around every corner and whether or not it'll be friend or foe. This category ends in a tie. Something we discussed just now actually has its own category though. We can't ignore it because it's such a huge component of what it feels like to play a video game. Yep, the physics system. It's pretty pivotal to enjoyment in Breath of the Wild, so let's start there. In Breath of the Wild, physics are included everywhere. Objects all have their own physics, including floating creature balloons, giant boulders, enemies, and Link himself. These physics can also be played with by using items with wind properties, or even your Sheikah Slate's stasis ability. There's far more than I can mention in just this one video, but rest assured, the physics system is deep and varied. As for the physics in Pokemon Legends, well, the only thing that have physics seems to be the trainer, and they're not very good. Things are fairly normal when grounded, but falling in Legends has an oddly horizontal trajectory. I still get weirded out by it sometimes. Beyond that, your character's attempts to climb steep slopes and swim in the water are hardly satisfying, slowing the game to a crawl until you call on a Pokemon to help you. I appreciate needing Mount Pokemon to get things done, but slopes and water could have been handled better in my opinion. Finally, traversing on Weirder can also be very wonky when faced with slopes. It's hard to explain, but when you see it, you know what I mean. This category goes handily to Zelda Breath of the Wild. There's more though. On top of its physics system, Breath of the Wild includes a chemistry system that allows enemy and assets to catch fire, conduct electricity, and more. The chemistry system also ties into the physics system, as grass catching fire can create an updraft we can use to fly up quickly with our paraglider. Again, there's so much chemistry in the game, I can't cover it all here, but it's a huge asset Breath of the Wild has over so many games. And one of those games is Pokemon Legends Arceus. Yeah, Legends has no chemistry system whatsoever. It feels a little off to do a blazing fire attack and not have scorched the grass or even left a visual burn on the opposing Pokemon. Zelda Breath of the Wild doesn't just get 1, but 2 points here for having an entire complex system that doesn't even exist in the rival game, bringing the score to 9 for Breath of the Wild, while Pokemon Legends stays at 7. Finally, a pivotal part of video games, the combat system. Both Pokemon Legends and Zelda Breath of the Wild sport combat systems of their own, each with a distinctive flavor set to quench different thirsts for satisfaction. There's no denying they're wildly different. Looking at Breath of the Wild, combat is both easily accessible and deep at the same time. You can be sneaky with the use of bombs, arrows, and other runes, or you can go in swords blazing for a fight. You can use physics and chemistry to your advantage. It really is fun to experiment. Once you get a very, very deep understanding of the game with its various quirks, you can even make the game look like a Bayonetta fight, where Link absolutely demolishes his victims and sometimes even uses witch time to do so. Seriously, the combat can be very intense. As for Pokemon Legends, things are a little more straightforward. It's a unique beast because you have 2 types of combat, overworld action and battle sequence turn-based strategy. In the overworld, your options include things like being sneaky and throwing fruit to lure wild Pokemon, giving you the chance to attempt an easy victory with a catch, or a slight advantage to victory in a fight. You can also fight fully without the use of your own Pokemon thanks to items such as Mud Balls, Sticky Globs, and more. Still waiting for someone to do a full playthrough this way, BT dubs, so please do that, somebody. When enemies attack you, you have the ability to dodge, run, or mount a Pokemon at any time, except when you get hit with a status affliction. The coolest part about Legends though is its seamless transition to turn-based battles, which feels extra strategic and high stakes this time around thanks to the tweaked balancing to health and attack power, as well as the implementation of strong and agile style for moves. Layer upon layer of combat strategies are present in Pokemon Legends, and all of them are easily accessible to the player. It really is masterfully done. On top of that, the juxtaposition of action combat and turn-based strategy is supremely unique, and something I don't think exists in many other games. Yet, it feels perfected here on its first attempt in the franchise. Having so many accessible options for combat means Legends is more likely to satisfy more players than Breath of the Wild ever could. Especially since the Bayonetta-esque combat that I mentioned in Breath of the Wild requires deep knowledge of the game's quirks and even glitches to make it work. There are very few people out there who can actually pull all that off. We're not done talking about the combat though. Boss battles offer another way to test your skills that the game has prepared for you. In Breath of the Wild, the bosses of the 4 dungeons are fairly basic as far as testing prior skills go. Most people who play Breath of the Wild will admit, the boss battles, even the Ganon fight at the end, don't do much more than the mini-bosses and trials we face throughout the game. Not to mention the fact that all the bosses are just different forms of Ganon. It's boring visually and contextually. Catching the divine beasts themselves has always been the most fun part of the boss fights, and we can't deny just how important these segments are, but they're typically short-lived by comparison to the Ganon Blights and dungeon innards themselves, which is disappointing in the long run. The Pokemon Legends boss fights are all unique. Each subsequent boss even ups the ante by introducing new variations of attacks that we need to dodge. These boss fights truly feel like tests of the skill we've owned through our journey as always, we have the option to beat them with just our trainer or a mix of our trainer and our Pokemon. I felt exhilarated every time I fought a noble Pokemon, and like I was truly in harmony with my Pokemon after our personal struggles. The final bosses and the post-game bosses offer not only more challenge and epic scale, but even more curveballs and variation to keep each battle fresh and worthwhile. This includes even the roaming Pokemon. I absolutely loved every moment of these, which is why, after all we've talked about, I'd say Pokemon Legends Arceus has a decent edge over Zelda Breath of the Wild in the combat department, earning it 1 point in its attempt to catch up in the score. So, Zelda Breath of the Wild is currently in the lead by just 1 point, but there are definitely more categories to cover. That's right, keep an eye out for part 3 of Pokemon Legends Arceus versus Zelda Breath of the Wild, where I'll be going over story, music, and more. So what do you think so far though? Let me know down in the comments, and until the next video, I hope you enjoyed this one. I've been JotoJohnny, signing off. Peace out.